So he said, what drink problem? I don't have any drink problem. I just get up in the morning and pour myself a drink. Oh, well, never mind.
And that's the end of the news flash. Now back to afternoon theatre.
Oh. Hey, let's try this one. Do you know the one about the two mafioso guys that are at a swimming pool in Miami, and a little fella struts past them and belly flops into the water, you see. So one of the mafiosos says to the other one, he says, you know, I don't believe that fella's a judge. He doesn't look the part. The other one says, what do you mean you don't believe he's a judge? He's one of the finest judges that money can buy. Oh, that's better. Do you know the one about the judge and the lady? Oh, hello. Thought you were leaving early today. What's the matter? What's happened?
There's been an accident.
What are you talking about?
It's Ruth.
Huh? What the hell's going on?
British Airways phone. I tried to get hold of you.
All 176 people on 2 aircraft, one of them a British Airways Trident, died today when the planes collided over Yugoslavia. It's the world's worst mid-air collision. Both planes came down 20 miles from the city of Zagreb in northern Yugoslavia. The Trident was carrying 54 passengers and a crew of 9 on a scheduled flight from Heathrow Airport to Istanbul. The second plane, a DC-9, had more than 100 people on board. It was flying from the Yugoslavian Adriatic port of Split to Cologne in West Germany. The Trident, flight number BE-476, left Heathrow at 9:21 this morning. The DC-9 belonged to the Inex Adria airline of Yugoslavia. It had been chartered by a German firm. Most of the dead were West Germans. The planes crashed several miles apart. Rescue teams included members of the Yugoslavian army. Both planes were flying at 33,000 feet when they collided. British Airways said it was more than 2 hours later before they heard of the disaster. It's thought the Trident lost its starboard wing in the collision. A Lufthansa pilot who was flying nearby said that after the collision there appeared to have been an explosion. British Airways have given a number for relatives to ring for information about the crash. It's 01, that is if you're outside London.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Goodbye.
Probably a bit weak, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine, thank you. You go on home, do you understand? I should be all right. Somebody explained to me. Clear blue skies. No problem reported by either plane. Someone's responsible. I should be strung up. Go on, I'll see you in the morning.
Zagreb Airport, April 1977.
Would Mr. Richard Weston, passenger recently arrived from London, please contact the airport information desk?
Mr. Weston?
Mr. Murchison?
Dragomir Modrushan. Call me Drashko, okay? It wasn't difficult to spot you. The hat. Is this the first time you've been here, Mr. Weston?
No. I came out to take her body home. It never really struck me what had actually happened until I was checking the loading of the coffin onto the plane.
As soon as the inquiry into the crash ruled out pilot error, the public prosecutor was actually bound to bring charges. You must feel very bitter about them. I mean the controllers.
Glasgow, I'm going to have to lean pretty heavily on your know-how during this trial. Your system's 1,000,000 miles from ours. So I want you to steer me through all the way, all right?
This is my private number. Any problems, 24-hour service. We'll make sure we squeeze every penny we can for Ruth's family.
That's not the most important thing as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you know, as their lawyer, that makes you a co-prosecutor at the trial.
Mm-hmm. They're still held in jail, the air traffic controllers?
Only one now. Gradimir Tasic. He could get 20 years, you know. Mr. Weston, you didn't by any chance bring any duty-frees, did you? I've got rather a soft spot for your Benson and Hedges. On the day of the crash, the peasants lit a candle for each of the victims, here in the mud. It must have been a very moving sight. 176. One for each of the... What kind of a car do you drive, Mr. Weston? A Rolls-Royce, it's got to be. You know, one day I shall have one of those. That's the only thought that gets me out of bed in the morning. Of course, we own our own apartment, my family. That's pretty unusual here, you know. I've been to England and the States. It's crazy, you know, but I wouldn't live anywhere else except this place. Do you know what they say about Yugoslavia? We've got 5 nationalities, 4 languages, 3 religions, 2 alphabets, and 1 government. What more could you want, eh? Do you know what that says? Air traffic controllers guilty of causing mid-air collision. People around here have made their minds up already.
Well, that's not a very healthy sight the morning before a trial. That would be contempt of court back home, do you know that?
Well, it wasn't exactly healthy for those people spilling out of the aircraft, was it? Oh. Who'd be an air traffic controller, eh? It's bad enough down here.
Zagreb District Court, April 11th, 1977, 8 a.m. All the court proceedings which follow are drawn from official Yugoslav records.
call upon the public prosecutor to read the indictment.
Isn't a wicked sight. Quite the Old Bailey, eh? Pity I like all that.
Gradimir Tasic. As air traffic controller in charge of the upper sector of Zagreb airspace at 11:15 a.m. on September 10th last, you are accused of failing to ensure minimum separation between a British Airways Trident and an Inex Adria DC-9. Therefore, as the responsible person who supervises a means of transportation and who by ineptitude has caused great loss of life and property, you have violated Article 271, Paragraph 2 of the Penal Code. Giulio Dacic, you are accused of failing to ensure that the controllers did not leave their place of work until they were officially released, and of failing to give Tasic assistance when you could see that he was overloaded. Mladen Hochberger, you are accused of leaving your place of work without consideration to the possible overloading of Gradimir Tasic. Nenad Tepes, you are accused of arriving late for duty and of failing to familiarize yourself with traffic on the sector, although you could see that Tasic was overloaded. Bojan Erovic and Gradimir Pelin, you are accused of failing to remove any possible risk of conflict with regard to your wish to hand over control of the DC-9 to the upper sector controlled by Gradimir Tasic. Pelin, you are further accused of breaching air traffic regulations by not showing the flight information slip for the DC-9 to Tasic at the precise moment of coordination of its projected climb into Tasic's sector. The accused will be seated.
Yes. And then?
At about 2 minutes past 11, Hochberger got up and told me that he was going to look for Tepes, who was supposed to have taken over at 11. There should be 3 controllers at every sector, but Zagreb is 50% under strength. Anyway, after Hochberger left, I took over as controller. The radar was playing up that day, so I used it only as backup.
Tasic then stated that Erovic, the middle sector controller, called over to him and mentioned something about a climb. Tasic said he waved back to him to indicate that he was too busy to talk. What happened then?
Pelin came over and pointed to a shadow on my radar screen.
Did he say anything?
We asked if that plane could climb into my sector. I told him to keep it at its present height and to check again after it had passed Zagreb.
Did he give you any more information about it?
He had no flight information strip with him. I didn't consider this conversation to be a transfer. Pelin hadn't told me enough about it. Sometime between 13 and 14 minutes passed, he finally handed me the DC-9 strip. It can only have been 15 seconds later that the DC-9 called me and told me that he was climbing through my sector. Knowing that the Trident was immediately above it, I ordered the DC-9 to remain at its present height. 10 seconds later, the 2 shadows merged. I saw them part, then vanish from the screen.
Tasic states that Pelin did not initially bring with him the flight information slip for the DC-9.
In the moments before the collision, why did you use the Croatian language when the rules require English?
I am authorized to use Croatian when speaking to Yugoslav crews, Article 53.
If you felt that you were overburdened in any way, why didn't you report this to the supervisor?
Well, that would have lost more valuable time.
When Tepes did arrive, why didn't you turn over the controller's job to him as per the schedule?
I was too busy. I took over as controller because I thought it was my duty.
Isn't it true to say, Tasic, that you have a reputation for preferring to work alone?
There are times during a night shift when traffic is light. I've been on my own. There should be 3 men per sector like the rest of Europe.
Tassich states that in his opinion the main causes of the disaster were shortage of staff, problems with the radar, and the fact that the sectors are divided by height rather than by areas of traffic density. He also states that the rules for coordination were not specific. And finally, he states that the direct cause of the accident was a mistake made by the middle sector controllers.
At about 11:05, Tepesh still hadn't replaced me, so I stood up and told Tassich I was going to look for him. Tassich didn't say anything.
Had you convinced yourself that Tassich was not overloaded with work?
Well, everything was normal. Tassich was in complete control of the situation. He didn't have to do the assistant's job too. There was nothing urgent to do.
Did you ask your supervisor's permission to leave?
Yes.
That's not true. No one came near me.
Comrade Judge, look. A controller would never leave a colleague if he could see that he was in trouble. Anyway, everyone knows that Tassich liked to work alone.
I was late because I'd been having stomach troubles.
And when did you meet Hochberger?
At about 7 minutes past, after I'd come out of the toilet.
And what did he say to you?
He told me everything was okay. I went over to Tassich. He was doing fine. He told me there wasn't much traffic about.
So you weren't unduly worried about what time you arrived on the sector?
Other people are often late. If that's the case, I wait until they arrive before going.
Have you been punished for being late before?
Yes. But take a look at the records, comrade. I've also had a lot of commendations for my work.
I was leaving the flight dash desk at 11. I passed Hochberger, who was talking to you. I heard you say to him, "Hockey, you're not thinking about what you're supposed to be doing at all, are you?" Hochberger answered, "Well, in that case, neither is Tepesh. He still hasn't turned up." I heard you say it.
You've just made that up. You didn't tell the inquiry that, did you? I was sitting at my desk the whole time. Nobody came near me. Nobody.
Tassich and Pellin tell conflicting stories about the handover of the flight information slip for the DC-9. Now, would you come forward? Repeat your story to Pellin.
You gave me nothing until it was too late. There was no transfer, no clearance for that plane to climb into my sector.
I warned you about the Trident. You're lying. You had that strip in your hand. It told you all you needed to know.
Well, that's not true.
You could have refused the coordination. There would have been...
There was no coordination. You're lying.
You just forgot about the Trident.
No.
Why don't you admit it?
No, that is not true. You're lying.
You know, we call this place the phony witness, Mr. Weston. Well, they say that anyone who ever wants a witness can always find one here. But it's only a story, of course. What did you think of this morning's little scene, then? They're like a class of school kids. Nobody wants to take the blame.
Drasko, the whole setup takes a lot of getting used to. All right, the punishment should fit the crime. But the point is that in England, in a situation like this, the question of a crime wouldn't arise at all, unless you could prove they were blind drunk or plotting sabotage.
Well, those two train drivers got put away, and they weren't saboteurs.
Which train drivers?
There was a crash here back in about 1974. 170 people killed. Same judge.
What did they get?
The same as this lot can expect. 20 years.
20 years? It's barbaric.
That makes 42 days and about 20 hours for each victim.
That's an appalling equation.
Listen, would you like me to introduce you to the public prosecutor? You know you're part of his team.
Later.
We've got the big white chief from the Federal Board of Aviation this morning. Experts. They'll make sure the blame sticks where it causes the least damage, you see.
Would it therefore be true to say, comrade, that there is a serious staff shortage problem at Zagreb?
Well, as you can see from our report, we certainly do have manning problems. We're especially short of very experienced controllers.
Do you personally feel that the present training given to controllers is adequate?
We do have a problem keeping up standards. A few years ago, the training school couldn't cope, but it's been expanded now. We tried to run refresher courses, but well, these have had to be scrapped for financial reasons.
You must be aware, comrade, that before the events of last September, several controllers have been removed from Zagreb Center for incompetence.
Yes, it's true. We do have a recurrent problem, training up controllers who don't reach the required standards. But having said that, in the annual report, Zagreb has always received very good marks for quality of work.
Comrade Judge, I'd like to ask a question. Why hasn't anything been done to sort out the radar? It's still on test after lying there for 2 years, and there are no rules worked out governing its use.
Well, I can't personally understand why this question hasn't been sorted out. I know there have been problems, delays in the supply of equipment, and, as you say, problems sorting out the rules. But unfortunately, there's only one man working in the regulations department. Well, I only rubber stamp the rules. I blame myself for not going into them more deeply. I would just like to make the point that I'm fairly new at this job, and I can't be expected to be familiar with every aspect yet.
Your Commission of Inquiry clearly states that had existing rules not been broken or ignored, the disaster would not have taken place. But you yourself have just told us that the situation regarding these rules was really chaotic. What can you tell us?
In the last 10 years, air traffic has increased by 85%. Now, just imagine the strain that this has imposed on air traffic controllers all over the world. If you like, we're the Cinderellas of the aviation world. We're always being left behind.
Can you be specific as to the number of controllers that Zagreb is currently lacking?
I would say 30 to 40 extra men. See, we have a problem with finance. Every year we put in an air budget for government approval, and every year they cut it by 30%.
There's an advertisement here for new recruits. Amongst other perks, it promises that decent housing goes with the job. What do you say, comrade, that the housing allocated to Gradimir Tasic was of a kind that ensures a contented background? It's so vital, I would have thought, to a controller's attitude to his work.
The housing problem for controllers drafted here from Belgrade does need looking into. I know there's a tendency for them to want to return to Belgrade. It's causing us headaches, I admit. It was irresponsible of us to put that bit about housing into the advertisement. It can't be carried out.
Let's hope this one's got a stronger instinct for self-preservation.
Comrade, Gradimir Tasic has stated in his evidence that had the Trident crew been paying closer attention to the traffic situation rather than to a crossword, the disaster may have been avoided. As an aviation expert, what is your reaction to this?
British Airways do have a written rule which requires crews to keep a lookout for other planes. But in this case, it's been proved that the DC-9 struck from underneath. The sky was clear, but the Trident crew would have had no warning of disaster. In my opinion, the point is entirely invalid. I would like to remind the court that the Commission of Inquiry clearly dismissed the notion that any action on the part of any pilot had a bearing on this accident.
Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. I also feel that it's important that that goes on the record again. The witness stated that the Commission of Inquiry dismissed the idea that pilot error had any bearing on this accident.
All the traffic from Asia, the Middle East, and Australia flies over Zagreb. And air equipment is not adequate. It often happens that radio frequencies just don't work. And when that happens, it makes life very, very difficult.
The witness states that all the air traffic from Asia, from the Middle East, and
what's the point of improving their equipment if they haven't got enough staff to man what they've already got?
Whose side are you on? We seem to have caught Watergate fever. Those guys need their brains tested. Washing their dirty linen in public. Why drag in all these side issues? Do you fancy a drink?
No, thanks. I've got a speech to write.
You're going to make a speech?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've got the right. You're one of the prosecution team. Do you want any help?
No, thanks. I think I'll handle this one on my own.
This is a speech for the defense. What are you trying to do? Okay, I know they haven't got a hope in hell of getting off, but this is dangerous stuff, Richard. You're a co-prosecutor.
Listen, Dresco, I'm no bleeding heart liberal. I'm as anxious as you all were to nail whoever was to blame. But no one, with one iota of intelligence, could let those men sweat it out in jail without kicking up one hell of a fuss. Now, you heard what their boss said yesterday. Oh, that did it for me. Are you trying to tell me that...
Richard, if you make this speech, you'll make a fool of yourself. You'll make a fool of me as your advisor in front of a judge that I've got to face over and over again. This year, next year. If you can't think of yourself, think of me. I could lose a lot of friends, possibly a living even. And maybe that doesn't mean much to you. Anyway, why all this sudden concern for Tasic and Co? I just don't get it.
What do you think the air traffic controllers in London, in Timbuktu, are saying when they read about this trial? I'll tell you what they're saying. They're saying, there, but for the grace of God, go I. Every time an air traffic controller comes on duty, he knows that a mid-air collision or a near miss for which he can be held responsible is a distinct possibility. If he starts looking at those dots in front of him and on his screen as so many hundred human beings, he'd go out of his mind. Can't you see the effect of this?
Oh, come on. What are you trying to tell me? That those guys are crazy? They're far too clever at shifting the blame.
Yes, to save their own skins. They're liable to get 20 years. Now, if you or I were in their shoes, well, who knows? The whole point is they should never have been put on the spot where they had to lie at all. Yes, I know. The public needs a scapegoat. The media thinks it's its duty to offer up a selection. But it does not follow that the courts have to pander to this witch hunt.
Richard, hold on. Now, you forget one thing. Under the Yugoslav Penal Code, the public prosecutor had no choice but to bring them to trial. I've told you that...
If the law as it stands says that their action is criminal, then the law is wrong and should be changed. It won't be the first time.
Richard, with respect, you've been here 5 minutes, and you want us to change our laws.
Too tired to argue. If you want to make yourself useful, I ordered some sandwiches about a week ago.
Leave it to me. Ovo je sova gospodina Vestina. Jesus sam viži, kože sam naružo pred pola sata. It's all fixed. What's it to you what happens to these men? She was your girlfriend, wasn't she? How do you feel when you see those men every day in court? It's 100% in your interests that those controllers are put inside. That way, the government is indirectly responsible. We can press for damages. Am I right? Of course I'm right. You've got her family to think about.
Look, I've already told you her family have given me an entirely free hand. They're not interested in money for money's sake. It won't bring her back.
What I'm trying to say is you're stepping out of line as a foreigner.
What you're trying to say, you've already made quite clear. You're worried about your own neck.
You're a co-prosecutor. How do you expect them to react to a speech for the defense? They might laugh, but somehow I don't think...
It's English. If you don't want to help, I understand. I'll find someone who will. I don't have much time.
I don't understand the English. Always backing the underdog. Automatically.
Come in. You can't see what I'm driving at all, can you?
I see 176 dead people, including your girlfriend. And every day in court, I see 6 men who are responsible for their safety. Did you know that every 24 hours, $1 billion worth of metal passes over here? 1 billion.
Look, just read this carefully and see if any of it penetrates.
Richard, you do understand, don't you, that all the respect that I've gained by being associated with someone like you could go out of the window?
I've got work to do. Who do you suggest I call first?
Okay. I'll be there.
Let me take the court into the mysterious electronic world in which air traffic controllers live. Now, many of us have stressful jobs. Many of us carry heavy responsibilities. I ask the court to recognize that the air traffic controller's responsibility is a very special one, and that the stress which that responsibility induces is of an abnormal nature. The job of juggling airliners and making snap decisions on which hundreds of lives depend is a Herculean task. It takes a very special individual to withstand that onslaught day after day, because it is a job which very few of us could perform at all, let alone endure. I sincerely believe that, while I respect the fact that this is a criminal trial of the defendants, that the court will more properly discharge its obligations to society if it will use its powers in an imaginative and resourceful way, and not limit itself to the punishment of those who stand before it today. They, as I have endeavored to show, are themselves victim of a system. Is it not a fact that the aviation community has created a system which has grown into a monster which we have not had the time to learn how to control in the real sense? On September the 10th, Gradimir Tasic was the final link in a system that failed. And yet, if we single out an individual or individuals for blame and lock them up, the deeper underlying problem remains unresolved. And next week, another individual in the same fallacious system may make the same error with equally disastrous consequences. That there was confusion, misunderstanding, mishandling, breaches of the rules, overwork, unauthorized absenteeism, shortage of skilled staff at Zagreb Control would seem to be undisputed. But let me make myself clear, beyond any doubt, I do not ask this court to condone or overlook any blame attaching to the defendants. For what I do ask is that this be seen in perspective. One could, I suppose, draw a parallel. The temptation is irresistible. If one were to say that doctors, in prescribing the wrong drugs, were then subject to criminal prosecution, ask, I suggest, what kind of medical profession we would have tomorrow. The answer is only too painfully clear. It is no exaggeration to say that the aviation community around the world waits with bated breath for the decision of this court. All these defendants will have to live with the thought of that catastrophe for the rest of their lives. And that, together with the experience of this trial, would, I suggest, be wholly sufficient punishment in the circumstances. The real danger is that the effect of a prison sentence on these men will be disastrous for the morale of the air traffic control system throughout the world, and therefore directly affect the safety of the traveling public. The imprisonment of these defendants will be wholly counterproductive to the solution which is sought. Instead of being in the limelight today as the architect of tragedy, Zagreb could tomorrow be, by virtue of an enlightened decision of this court, a model for world civil aviation. The lives of those killed on September the 10th will not have been sacrificed in vain.
Guilt cannot be an objective concept. It is a theory, a value judgment, escaping rational analysis and scientific determination.
How's Tassage? Oh, he'll be okay. A mild heart murmur, maybe. It's nothing serious. Richard, I'm sorry. You understood why.
If Darchik as shift supervisor sat working at his desk, it does not follow that he was conscious in neglecting his work of supervising the control room. The charges against the middle sector controllers, Edovich and Pelin, are found to be invalid. The work of this sector was perfectly normal. To determine Hochberger's and Tepish's guilt, it will be imperative to demonstrate that their absence caused an overburden of work for Tassich, which in turn caused a disaster. No direct causal link, however, can be established between the proven breaches of regulation by the two accused and the collision. How these men will be disciplined is up to the aviation authorities. As far as Tassich is concerned, there is only one possible conclusion in the court's eyes. Tassich accepted coordination with the middle sector and gave permission for the DC-9 to climb. The resulting mid-air collision was caused by his negligence. The court has examined possible extenuating circumstances. Tassich had just received a transfer back to Belgrade, and there are particular problems relating to controllers who are transferred to Zagreb from Belgrade. There are problems of housing, separation from their families. Their minds are bound to wander back and forth to their hometowns. And Tassich was such a case, and this may well have contributed to his state of mind on the day of the crash. The fact that the radar was on test and unreliable made his work that much harder. And yet, the court cannot accept that he was overworked. He made only one non-urgent call to Belgrade, which was, strictly speaking, the job of an assistant. Air traffic controllers must be constantly vigilant. They must be aware of the terrible cost of one slip. And their sense of responsibility is heightened by the knowledge that if they deviate from the rules, the law will take stern measures with them. The accused will be upstanding. It is the verdict of this court that the defendants Darchik, Tepish, Hochberger, Edovich and Pelin be set free. Defendant Tassich is hereby sentenced to a term of 7 years imprisonment. The accused has been in custody since September the 10th last, and this has been taken into consideration in assessing his sentence. The court will disperse.
Five out of 6, Richard. You must be pleased. Can I give you a lift to the hotel?
We'd just like to say
thank you.
Yes, it's your speech. It tipped the balance. It helped us get us all off. We've got a lot to thank you for.
You helped us win the fight. Please, come and have a drink with us. It's the least we
Vladimir
can do.
Tasic is on his way back to jail. With every scrap of blame for this disaster pinned squarely on his shoulders. Till we get them to see reason and get him out. Well, the fight is only just starting.
He'll appeal, won't he?
No doubt he will. And I'm sure you haven't forgotten that under your laws, the prosecutor can also appeal against your acquittal. So all in all, your exuberance, if I may say so, is a little premature. You'll excuse me.
Mr. Weston, what do you think the consequences of a trial like this are likely to be?
Well, as you know, I represent a bereaved family. And when I get back home and they say to me, well, what happened to Zagreb? And I tell them, this chap got locked up for so many years. It's not going to do them or anybody else any good. But if I could have said to them, there's going to be an official investigation into the whole business of air traffic control with an aim of improving it, resulting in the greatest safety for everyone who flies, well, then they might say, thank goodness she didn't die in vain. Good day.
Thank you.
Our flight to London will take 2 hours, 15 minutes, and we'll be flying at a height of 31,000 feet. Our route will take us over Munich and Brussels before landing at London Heathrow at 18:55 local time.
Richard Weston continued to campaign on Tasic's behalf, organising an international air traffic controllers petition to President Tito. On November 29, 1978, when Tasic had served 26 months in jail, he was released. Meanwhile, Yugoslavia quietly set to work to reform and reorganize the air traffic control system at Zagreb. A system they had always maintained was in no way responsible for the tragedy.